Welcome. Hi, I'm Brian Schiff. Welcome to another show that I guarantee will be full of Schiff. In fact, this episode will be a little bit more full of Schiff than usual. I hope you'll be entertained as much as educated. I'm an active Gold SEAL flight instructor and have been for over 40 years. I'm also on the board of directors for the National Association of Flight Instructors, or NAFI, and as a side job, I'm a captain for a major U.S. airline so that I can provide for my airplane. On this episode of the Shift Show, we're going to have Jason Miller with us from the Finer Points, and we're going to be looking at standard operating procedures. And we're going to have a good time with that. Those of you might have seen us talk about that before. So I'm really looking forward to that. Many people ask me why I'm doing this. I do it to help others become safer pilots, make aviation safer, and overall, I like to reduce the number of accidents. Accidents are rare. But if they do happen, it's comforting to know that Avemco has your back, and Avemco will help you navigate the troublesome waters that follow an accident. But they'd rather not need to. So they've sponsored our program because they believe in what we're doing, and hopefully we can reduce accidents. Not all aircraft insurance policies and premiums are the same. As the only direct writer in the market, Avemco never uses third-party insurance agents, and instead connects you directly with an aviation underwriter in their Frederick, Maryland office, ready to solve problems and approve coverage based on what you fly and how you fly it. Avemco provides lightning fast quotes, competitive rates, and personalized policies that are easy to read and tailored for you. Call them for your free quote or visit avemco.com/shiftshow. And don't forget to tell them that you're a Shift Show subscriber and save 5%. Now here's the small print. Premium credits are subject to underwriting guidelines, including Avemco recognized training and memberships. It's the best I can do. I don't think I could be an auctioneer, but in any event, tonight's episode also qualifies for Wings credit. All episodes are eligible for FAA Wings credit. And if you are not familiar with the Wings program, we've put the Wings user guide in the course materials on this webpage. Wings credits also can apply towards a flight review. And they can also get you some leniency with the FAA. I've heard that if you have a lot of Wings credits, you can get a little bit of leniency from the FAA if you do something wrong. You can also get discounts with your aviation insurance. Not to mention the most valuable part, the investment in your safety. So every episode will have these 5 sections. We'll look at an accident. We'll cover related FAR and AIM topics or regulatory stuff. We'll discuss training techniques, stuff that we do. We'll look at technology that can help us with preventing that kind of an accident. Then at the end, just for fun, we'll play a game testing your aviation trivia and knowledge. Tonight, we're going to be talking about setting the standard, personal standard operating practices. I know it's a topic near and dear to my heart. It's also a topic near and dear to Jason's heart, who will be with us tonight. Jason is a seasoned flight instructor and the creator of the Finer Points, a widely respected aviation podcast. I've been listening to it since I think it was around before YouTube, and does some outstanding stuff and explaining stuff to make it sound simple. And his instructional platform is dedicated to helping pilots enhance their skills. He's over 2 decades of experience in general aviation. Now, Jason has extensive technical knowledge combined with a passion for clear and engaging teaching, and that has led to his tremendous success. And he's renowned for simplifying complex flying concepts for novice and experienced pilots. My favorite was seeing him walk around the ramp with his wings, showing how to do a lazy 8. So he's done some really creative things to teach. And when his app shows you actually videos in flight, actually demonstrating the part of what he's trying to teach you. His teaching philosophy emphasizes developing sound judgment, which is a hard part if you can teach judgment, but he does a very good job trying, lifelong learning, and a profound respect for the art and science of flight. His podcast, YouTube channel, and instructional courses have inspired thousands of aviators to fly with greater confidence, precision, and safety. Jason, welcome. It's so good to have you.
Thanks, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this stuff before. I'm glad to do it in this venue so that we can do it a little bit more formally. We've done it at Oshkosh before, and we'll probably do it again. But so what's really fascinating to me is this training app you have. So you have a new app out. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's essentially like a CFI in your pocket. It's got, of course, written and oral test prep. But my favorite part really is the flight section of each course. where it's kind of like taking lessons with me. And like you mentioned, we have an opportunity to teach everything the way I would want to teach it. If anyone out there would want to be my student, I just tell them, get the app first, check it out. No matter where you are, our hope is that you can feel as though you're learning to fly from me and all the SOPs and all the tips and tricks. So.
Well, that's very cool. I've looked at it myself, and I've had my son watch some of them as well. I think that you do a fantastic job with it, and you feel like you're right there in the cockpit with you. So thanks for doing that. I think if anybody wants to try it for free, they can do this. There'll also be a link to it in the course resources and on the web page on my website as well. So,
yeah, the thing that you're showing there too, I just want to let people know that SOP checklist is particular to tonight's talk, and that is free in the app. So anybody who downloads the app can go to the resources section and get and print that checklist. But there is also an SOP mini course, and all the SOPs are taught in pretty much every course in the app. So throughout the evening, if people hear procedures they want to adopt, or they want to just kind of see what procedures I would teach, that's relevant to tonight's talk. So.
Excellent. Well, that's awesome. So yeah, just go to the app and you can download. That's on the free side on the course resources. I think you've got a lot of books in there too, all the FAA books and AIM and FARs and everything. I really like what you've done also with the ACS, because it used to be where, a new task was on a new page.
Yeah.
And not that you're reinventing the wheel. You just, I think, organized it so that they don't start mid-page. It starts at the beginning of a page. And those of us who are a little slow up here, it's really helpful.
Right. I think we just tried to keep the wheel round is all we were trying to do.
Keep the wheel around. Exactly. Awesome. Well, we're going to start off with the poll questions that we do at the end, the quiz questions. We're actually going to show them. If you're live, you can go ahead and participate with that. I'm going to go ahead and put the first one on the screen here. And we're not going to show the answers or the results until the end, but we're just kind of taking a look to see how much you know your trivia. And so question one is, what aircraft accident is responsible for the use of checklists? We've got a prototype B-17 Flying Fortress at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, a United Airlines Flight 173 near Portland, Oregon, or was it Northwest Airlines Flight 255 shortly after takeoff from Detroit, Michigan? One of those accidents actually led to the requirement of checklists and is why we have them now. So when you're done answering that, we'll go ahead and move on. But that's actually a lot of the things that we do are born in an accident or born from an accident. I think that's something you said, Jason, once before. I've heard you say this before, something about the airline living on.
Yeah, that's the whole, I think we'll get into that when we talk about SOPs, but in the commercial world, they're so good at it because the company usually survives the crash. And surviving the crash gives you an opportunity to change your procedures and make things better and do what I call bracketing safety, sort of bracketing toward perfection.
Yeah, and GA not always surviving the crash like an airline does. That's a good
exactly. Point. And then you just see the same thing happen over and over again. And
yep. So a lot of pilots use the term lights, camera, action, and it's used in the film industry. How does it apply to pilots? What do they use it for? Is it a reminder for the YouTubers to roll cameras? Is it a memory jogger for creating position reports? Or is it a memory jogger for before takeoff items? So lights, camera, action. What do we use that for? I know there's a lot of mnemonics like that. A lot of people have different things that they say at different times, which I think is good. Whatever helps you remember what you need to do at a certain time, I think those things are great. And we're going to talk about some more of those as we go on here. So question number 3, what does it mean when a military pilot says, reading the instructions? This was new to me. I didn't know this. Does that mean that he or she is reading a checklist? When they say reading the instructions, does it mean that he or she is ejecting from the aircraft? Or does it mean that he or she is coping with an emergency? So military always have a different way of saying things. And in this case, reading the instructions, what does that mean? Using a checklist, ejecting from the aircraft, or coping with an emergency? The answer may surprise you. We'll talk about that at the end tonight. Question 4, what items aboard Apollo 11 were so integral to the success of the first manned flight to the moon that Commander Module Pilot Michael Collins called them the fourth crew member? He referred to checklists as the fourth I just gave away the answer, didn't I? What are these things? Pencils, paper, or checklists? I'm not going to say the answer. Just erase what you just heard. Was so integral that he called him the fourth crew member. Given tonight's topic, I bet most of you probably got that anyway. So the fifth question, true or false? And this has, like, we just took a major lane change here, but we're going to mix it up. An air traffic control clearance is required to enter Class Delta airspace, Class D airspace. So true or false, do you need an air traffic control clearance to enter the Delta airspace? A lot of people get that a little bit wrong, so we'll talk about that at the end as well. All right, we ready to roll here? Again, we're going to have these 5 topics, and we're going to start with accident review. And regarding the study of accidents, I have a great presentation on that, like how to study accidents to learn a lot. And that's why I use it at the beginning of this program, so that, obviously something went wrong. We want to learn from it. Why? Because we don't want it to happen to us. Right. But I want to caution you, be very careful about the internet rapid response teams. Some of them are good. Some are, a little bit, guessing and speculating as to what happened. So let's try not to do that. So one thing that's problematic is pre-flighting the airplane. It's been very problematic. I think a lot of people are not giving a pre-flight the due diligence, and it remains to be a huge problem. Can you find something wrong with this airplane?
Looks perfectly fine to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a technique used in a pre-flight to maybe see the big picture, because sometimes you get so close to it that you might not see that you're missing an aileron. But we'll talk.
As we talk, Brian, I'm sure this will come up, but it's you show a picture like this, and it's really the hard part is diligence.
Right.
Everyone can look at the airplane, but are you really seeing it?
Look and see. And I've also know, and people who fire weapons will also say the same thing. Look at it, look away at something else, and look back at it. That's another technique that can be used. But taking the big picture, and we'll talk more about pre-flighting in a bit. Yeah. So the accidents we're going to talk about, the first one involved Dale Snodgrass. And most of you have probably heard about the Dale Snodgrass accident that happened in July 2021. It was in Lewiston, Idaho. Unfortunately, the NTSB probable cause came out and said that the pilot's failure to remove the flight control lock before departure and contribute was the cause of the accident. And contributing to the accident was his failure to perform an adequate pre-flight inspection and the flight control check before takeoff. Now, I don't know, in my 21,000 hours, I don't think I've ever flown an airplane without moving the flight controls through their full range of motion. And not to pick on him for whatever reason, but I think you can be so good at something that you become complacent. And I think that's where your diligence comes in, right?
100%.
So, what happened in this accident was shortly after takeoff, he couldn't move the flight controls and the aircraft pitched up and rolled over. And I'll show the video. It's tough to watch. I'm not going to play the audio, but you'll see it on the right side. This is a security camera or whatever for the airline, but a gate camera. You'll see him starting to roll the takeoff, and watch what happens. Ouch. It's tough to watch. It's impactful, but here it is in 50% speed, just kind of slowed down. The NTSB actually used this to look at the flight controls and see that they weren't moving. Please don't ever fly an airplane without moving all of the flight controls through their full range of motion before you take off, and certainly follow every step. No matter how insignificant that step may seem on the checklist, it's very important and was put there for a reason. More important, obviously, something so simple can get you. Also in the NTSB docket, which is in the course resources, is a flight control lock study that the NTSB did to look at this flight control lock, see how it works. The red bar is the flight control lock. It locks the flight controls, but you can still move the rudder pedals to steer the airplane on the ground. So you're probably wondering, well, how did he get it to the runway if all the flight controls were locked? That's how. This particular flight control lock does allow taxiing. I don't know why. I don't know why anybody would design anything like that. But I can't. I made that too small. I can't even see it. But still, yeah. So you can still taxi is basically what that's saying.
Yeah.
The pilot's operating handbook obviously calls for normal items. The two biggies, removing the control lock and the taxi flight controls check. I mean, these are things that we see in our manuals. Most of us see in our pilot operating handbooks. Flight controls, unlock, take the lock out. Don't modify the lock either. A lot of people modify the lock. And, my father lost a close friend because he modified the flight control lock and it wasn't as conspicuous as it could have been. And then, of course, check your flight controls through their full range of motion. Another accident was an A36 Bonanza in Summerlin Key, Florida. It crashed off the end of the runway during takeoff after it could not rotate. Again, the flight control lock was left in. The probable cause was that the pilot's failure to remove the flight control lock before takeoff. Does that sound familiar? It happens all too often. Here's one, a Hawker crashed on go-around, and this was in July of 2008. The Hawker Beechcraft 125-800 series was operating under the provisions of Part 135 and crashed while executing a go-around attempt after an aborted landing. So the safety issues discussed in this report are the crew actions, the lack of SOP requirements for Part 135 operators. Now, back when this accident happened, they didn't have the SOP requirements that Part 121 had, including CRM training and checklist usage, among many other things. If the flight crew had continued braking for the remainder of their landing, the NTSB determined that if they would have continued braking to a full stop and not attempted to go around, the airplane likely would have overrun the runway to ground speed somewhere between 23 and 37 knots and stopped between 100 and 300 feet beyond the runway end, but with a 1,000-foot runway safety area within that area. The airport diagram is here. That was the 5,500-foot runway that it went off the end of. I mean, to go around after landing and then go off the end, I mean, there's got to be a point where you're not going to go around anymore, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that should be decided ahead of time, right? Yeah,
landing commit, or maybe the go-around should have been initiated earlier. Something was probably wrong, and they decided to, watch this, hold my beer, I got this. Right. We're all mission hackers. We want to try to make it.
Yeah. And I think sometimes even just looking at all three of these, it's like comfort in the airplane. If you're too comfortable and complacent, these kinds of things can happen.
Yeah. Actually, I get scared when I catch myself being a little bit too comfortable and I got to rein myself in. So, all right, let's get back to diligence.
Right.
Again, the probable cause was that the captain's decision to attempt a go-around late in the landing roll with insufficient runway remaining. Ouch, that really hurts. Also contributing to the accident were, one, the pilot's poor crew coordination and lack of cockpit discipline, and two, actually, this crew was fatigued, which likely impaired both pilots' performance because charter schedule's pretty rough. Right. And also the failure of the FAA to require CRM training and SOPs for charter operators. So lastly, excuse me, there's one landmark airline accident, Northwest 255 in August of 1978. It was departing to Detroit for Santa Ana, and 154 out of 155 on board, plus 2 on the ground, were killed. There's one survivor. It was a 4-year-old girl. She was the sole survivor. Makes me wonder what she's doing today, and if she remembers that. There's the crash site afterwards. It's just awful. And then the probable cause for this was that the flight crew's failure to use the taxi checklist to ensure that the flaps and slats were extended for takeoff. And remember, regarding flaps, I like to teach that the first notch is mostly lift. The second notch is lift and drag, and the third notch is mostly drag. Yeah. Just a little technique to think about when, knowing what your flaps do. But this disaster emphasized the vital importance of checklist discipline, the critical backup role of takeoff warning systems, which are on the aircraft. And sometimes pilots will think, oh, there was something wrong with this. The warning system must be wrong. And you're going to hear a story from another Schiff that's going to make this episode a little bit more full of Schiff, and that's coming up next, about what happened with his flight that they had the takeoff warning horn go off. And this was back in 1968, in the summer of 68, which was a year, what was that, 20 years before I was born.
Wow.
No, it was the year after I was born. He was a brand new captain flying a 727. In fact, I've probably got to fly that same 727 like 30 years later. But here is his account of that event.
It was the summer of 1968, and I was a brand new captain. My crew and I were taxiing the Boeing 727 from the terminal building at Albuquerque to runway 8, and we were headed for Chicago. It was a warm evening. Density altitude was high, and the aircraft was really loaded, heavily. And we'd have to make a turn almost immediately after takeoff to avoid the Sandia Mountains east of the airport. As I advanced the thrust levers for takeoff, the cockpit calm was shattered by the intrusive blare of the takeoff warning horn. Something was obviously wrong. The horn sounds only when something is improperly configured for takeoff. I reduced power to idle and taxied off the runway. And I asked the first officer to tell the passengers over the PA that we had aborted because of rabbits on the runway. I didn't want our passengers to be upset or scared. We then checked to ensure that the spoilers were properly stowed, that the stabilizer trim was positioned in the green band, and that the wing flaps were properly deployed, to 5 degrees in this case. Now, everything was as it should be, so I began to initiate another takeoff, at which time the warning horn sounded again, seemingly with greater urgency. More rabbits, we explained. The systems were once again checked. Everything was as it should be. All 3 of us, 3 professional pilots, the third was a flight engineer, agreed that the horn was a false alarm. It had to be. Everything tied into the warning system was positioned properly. The captain, me, then asked the engineer to pull the appropriate circuit breaker and deactivate the horn. Who needed it? As the 727 gathered speed and reached almost about 100 knots during our third takeoff attempt, the first officer yelled out, "My God, it's the flaps! Abort! Abort!" Which is exactly what I did, immediately. The aircraft came to an abrupt halt, uncomfortably close to the end of the runway. This time with smoking tires and overheated brakes. There was no mention of rabbits this time. The first officer pointed out that the flap gauge indicated 2 degrees, not the 5 degrees that was required for a safe takeoff. This also meant that some of the leading edge devices were still retracted. Now, how can this be? The co-pilot asked in bewilderment. We all saw that the flaps were extended to 5, when clearly this was not the case. What in the hell happened? What makes this event so fascinating is that all 3 of us in that cockpit looked several times at the flap gauge, but did not see the 2-degree indication. Instead, we all kind of saw, or thought we saw, a 5-degree indication because that is what we had been conditioned to expect. Had this takeoff been continued, the heavily loaded Boeing likely would not have become airborne in the available distance. The passengers and the crew, that's us, and some of the rabbits that really do live near the runway, likely would have been sacrificed on the altar of checklist complacency. Now, the antidote for this kind of complacency is to force yourself to look and not simply glance at each item mentioned on the checklist. Ask yourself if you really do see what you expect or hope to see. Now, this process can take a little longer, but better ensures checklist compliance. You got to be careful.
Wow. So he tells that in a comical way, but that accident could have turned out like the Northwest one. And left me orphaned. That would have been bad. But I mean, that was a case where the automation was trying to talk to them, and certainly a case of continuation or expectation bias, where everybody on that crew was seeing what they wanted to see.
Yeah. Wow.
So we'll talk about some procedures. I'm going to power through this because the fun stuff is really in the techniques and the stuff that we teach. But I found some interesting documents. I found an advisory circular entitled Standard Operating Procedures for Pilots and Flight Deck Crew Members. And there's a lot of good stuff in here. It's tailored for Part 121, but the same stuff applies to GA pilots. I've given a talk called Airline Techniques for GA Pilots. Just because they are required to do it doesn't mean GA pilots can't do it. Mm-hmm. Change your minimums and act a little bit safer, just a higher degree of safety than GA. Chapter 4 tells you how to write procedures, and Chapter 5 tells you how to develop checklists. It's got some great advice. I'm going to mention it and then say that it's in the course resources if you want to work on your own. Yeah. And also you get a lot of great ideas from Jason's thing and what we're about to talk about as well. I do have a poll that you can take. It's actually a form to fill out with your own SOP suggestions that might incorporate into the SOPs that if you've seen me and Jason talk before, we promised a personal flight operations manual. He's come a lot closer to doing it than I have by, having it in his ground school app. So single pilot ops, this talks about, use of checklists. It advises what the single pilot should do with the checklist, like maybe mounting it on the panel. I like how Pipers have it, the before landing and the before takeoff checklist right there on the panel. Yeah. And a lot of other advice as well. It also advises pilots that the critical items are, gear and flaps. Those types of things should be short and contain only critical items. You shouldn't have a checklist about 100 steps long. I mean, right. Yeah, have you seen those checklists? It's like a recipe for how to fly the airplane, and pilots can't do anything but go step by step.
Yeah, or ignore it. Like a climb checklist in your typical light single, talking about opening a flight plan and tuning your FMS and picking your airspeed.
And breathing in and then breathing out.
Yeah, it's a
blink every now and then. Yeah.
You
can have so much on there that it becomes distracting.
Yeah.
Exactly. Interruptions, that's another thing you got to handle. What do you do if a checklist is interrupted? If you come across a step that can't be completed yet because it's not accomplished, do you teach something specific on that?
Just to start over, really. I don't know that there's much you can do. It's if you're interrupted, so much of it is ritualizing your flying, I think, and any opportunity to do that is important to make it kind of a ritual. And if you get interrupted, you have to kind of start the ritual at the beginning.
Right. And I think ritual is a good way to put it, because you just need to make this is the way, like you get up in the morning, you probably have a ritual, right? Yeah. I know it's the shuffle to the coffee maker, turn it on, shuffle to where the cups are, get it out. But it's every morning I'm doing it the same way. I could probably make my coffee in my sleep, and arguably sometimes I am, because I do it every time. So that's a good advice. Another problem is there's the top 6 errors that pilots make with checklists is they overlook items, or they'll fail to verify that something is set visually. Maybe you just heard a story about that. Checklists are contained errors, or they're published incorrectly, or they're incomplete, or they fail to complete a step after being interrupted. At the airlines, we teach the same thing. If a checklist is interrupted, you start it all over again. Right. Or they just don't complete it, or reading the wrong checklist. That's happened, a time or two as well. Yeah. Errors for preventing these mistakes. The advisory circular does also give some advice on that. So basically, routinely use the checklist, which you just got to develop that habit. Like you said, ritual. Check every item every time. Be thorough. Almost exaggerate how you're taking every step seriously. Yep. Slow down. If you've heard me talk, I say 2 speeds all the time, right? Slow and screw up. Slow. You want to go slow. Be deliberate. Read the checklist. And again, if you're interrupted, restart it. This advisory circular is also in the course resources, and you can take a look at that. There's a lot of good information in it. Why do pilots use checklists? It's not just a reminder. It reduces your mental workload. You don't have to remember things. You don't have to rely on your memory. others, that this power of the power of the checklist is so great that even NASA astronauts use it, surgeons use it in the operating room now. The medical industry is kind of taken over doing like what we do, nuclear plant operators and everything. So that's what very important. These checklists are becoming very industry-wide, used in different industries. So it also supports cognitive unloading, so your brain doesn't have to think, what do I have to do? Now, I think that we both teach, doing a flow first. So that habit, really, you don't have to use a lot of cognition if you're doing it the same way every time. But doing a flow and then reading the checklist to make sure everything is done, you don't have to worry as much. It takes a lot of load off your brain.
Yeah, and I think dividing it that way is such an important piece in a single pilot world, because that's really where we get the redundancy.
Dividing it like between the flow and then
right. And even if you're wrong or you miss something the first time, I always say to my students, you'll learn that. But if all you're doing is reading it, and you miss a line, you'll never know about it. There's no check in that. That's something different. We call that.
Agree, and it's not called a do list; it's a checklist. A lot of people say that. I'd be surprised if someone didn't put that in the chat already. It's not a checklist. It's not a do list. It's a checklist.
Exactly. And then so acronyms or flow checks or things like that.
Right. We'll talk about some of our favorite ones. Yeah, I think that. Like sometimes I'll take a student and they've been flying for a while. Now, when a brand new student on a brand new airplane, brand new day, first lesson, I might have them read through the before start checklist so they kind of see what they're doing. After they've been flying a few hours, I'll say, give me that checklist and just start the engine. Right. Get it started. See if you can figure out what it needs. So there's some cognitive action going on to think about, fuel, ignition, electricity. I need the electricity on. I need air to the engine. So all those things, put that together, common sense, and they get to learn about the systems. What they're really doing. It's
good that you do that because it's easy. I mean, after you've been doing a do list for so long, I mean, that's the way my first flight instructor taught me, is just as a do list. And the day my second instructor pulled the list out of my hand, like you described, I didn't know what to do. It's like, how as I've been flying for 3 years, how do I not know how to start this airplane?
Right. Checklist shouldn't be a crutch. I mean, so that's why we got these flows and we have, procedures, acronyms that we use, and we'll talk about that. But that's why we have that, and then we'll use the checklist. That's a backup. It's a safety net.
Yep.
Another thing I saw in the while I was doing my research is that there was a publication the FAA made called Human Performance Considerations in the Use and Design of Aircraft Checklists. I've been making my own checklist for a long time, and I found it fascinating that a lot of what I've done is actually already in here. And chapters in here include the need for a checklist, human factors, design considerations, and FAA policies, a checklist format, all kinds of stuff. It's a good document, again, in the course resources.
Cool.
Lastly, the FAA put out a safety alert for operators, a SAFO, safety alert for operators. And this one highlights SOPs and how they're widely recognized as a basic element of safe aviation practices and things that are of special interest to the FAA.
Cool.
I'm not going to go through all of it, but a lot of the things that it covers is that, I think I just said all that, but it covers a lot of stuff. I would recommend looking at it if you're going to be creating your own SOPs. One more advisory circular. Again, this is in the course resources as well, but this one gives guidelines for developing and implementing your own SOPs for safe aircraft operations during taxiing to avoid a runway incursion. So during taxi, there's a lot of things that happen, and I would include putting the airplane away and getting it out as well. But it's necessary, as I say, to lessen the exposure to hazards and risks by holding the workload to a minimum during taxi operations. So the basic 3 guidelines this one gives, that it can be accomplished through SOPs and the direct attention by the pilot of the pilot to essential tasks while taxiing the aircraft is in motion. When the airplane is moving, I remember my dad, and Dad, if you're watching this, you'll remember doing this too. Any excuse to smack me in the head with a sectional. And if I did anything while I was taxiing the airplane that wasn't necessary, that could wait for the run-up area, I'd get whacked in the head.
Nice. That's good training.
Well, yeah, might not work as well these days with somebody, but it does it got the message across. I didn't want to get whacked in the head. But SOPs should be simple. It should be very clear in how they're developed, not complex or convoluted, or else they won't get followed. And that's what this advisory circular suggested. It also contains numerous suggestions for ground ops. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk with you. What kind of things do you do, or do you tell your students to do during taxi as far as SOPs? We obviously couldn't cover them all in 1 hour.
Yeah. So, it's during taxi, it's really the taxi turns that we're doing, but it's an opportunity to kind of ritualize. So there's a sterile cockpit, like you said. We're not talking, we're not on our phone, we're not programming the radios. We do that at a different place, in the run up area. And there's even a language that I want them to say. So it's kind of, as I turn to the left, my turn coordinator or my turn indicator, if you're using a PFD with a glass panel, makes a turn to the left, the ball or the slab moves out to the right, the numbers decrease, the attitude indicators are stable, the magnetic compass is decreasing, then back to the right. And I want them to kind of say it the same way every time. And all of that is part of ritualizing the act of flying. And I think, like, if people are trained this way, I know it works this way for me, it's really where you start to make this transformation into the pilot. You cast the day away, the stress of the day. If you haven't flown in a while, it makes you feel comfortable. You're kind of, you remember this, you feel like, all right, I know how to do this. This is something that I've been trained to do. So I think it's an important part of beginning that flying ritual.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, while you're taxiing, obviously you're going to only do the things that you have to do, but paying close attention to where you're going. If you don't understand a clearance, ask ATC. I don't know why, but I've seen many pilots just afraid to query ATC. Which taxiway was it? And they're guessing. Well, ask.
Yeah.
Is it Bravo or Charlie? I don't know. If only there was a way to find out. Just a key microphone key away.
Yeah. It's fun. I think when you have a set of SOPs like this, it's like communications in a way. We're always trying to get better, or I am, and I hope that the pilots are. And with taxi, it's the same way. It's like you want to position the flight controls for the effects of wind, or have the yoke or the stick full back if the winds are calm, and you're checking all those turning instruments. You're listening to the communications. You've already briefed the taxi route. It's like waking up in the morning and you, like you said, you get that coffee and you feel excited for the day. I feel like you get in the airplane, you start the engine, you brief the taxi, and you begin to move, and it's the beginning of the flight. Everything's in front of you. This is a chance to really make it a perfect flight. Yeah.
And something you said reminded me that what I do every time. I try to follow the SOPs every time, so that when I go to training, which is a stressful time, and I'm checked on these things, it's no big deal because I've been doing them that way all along. And that made me just think of something with regard to the flight controls. I always have my students hold the flight control, even if it's only 3 knots of wind, hold the flight control where it should be as if it were 30 knots of wind. Show me where it should be. Mostly do that to train and test. But what happens is when there really is a wind, it's no big deal to them because they've been doing it all along on every flight. Don't just wait for a really strong wind to hold your flight controls, because what is the magic number?
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And just that you do it the way you've been doing it. The single pilot operators, there's not too many of those folks left, but they have really rigid SOPs, and that's sort of how they know if their pilots have been doing it. When you come in for your 6-month 135 check or whatever, if so much as a word is different, they correct you. They bring you right back into the rails. Nope, that's like I remember one of them. It was no runway was the call when the gear came up. And if you went back after 6 months and you said out of runway, gear up, it was like, nope, that's not what we say. We say no runway, just 2 words,
Oh yeah. At work where, they yell at us for not saying, it's the script, I called it, it's like, if you don't have the litany, they literally called it the litany for these procedures, then you're going to be corrected and retrained. It means you haven't been doing it right. But the problem, with airline, you fly with all these different people, they're going to expect you to say that one thing. But as a single pilot operator, you should expect yourself to say that one thing, and it keeps you in your groove. Like one thing you mentioned when we were talking before, if you fly wearing certain clothes and you show up one day wearing shorts and flip-flops, you're going to feel out of your groove. It's really weird.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of people can relate to that. Like anybody who's a police officer or was in the military or went to a private school or is an airline pilot, anybody that wears a uniform, it's like I think what GA pilots need to understand is there's a reason, like you as a professional airline pilot are talking about that just the rigidity, right? Of, the rigidity that people have. Hey, sweetheart, I'm on a call. The rigidity of that. And there's a reason they do it that way. So GA pilots simply need to trust that. They simply need to believe it.
Agreed. Yeah. And strictly. So this takes us to the training part. We've sort of been talking about it already. But what we were talking about was doing a flow and then doing a checklist. But so what makes you know when to do the flow? Well, at the airline, we talk triggers and flows, which is actually in one of those documents that's in the course resources, but they refer to it as an initiation anchor. Something happens that causes you to do something. And so when that trigger happens, you do a series of actions or one action, and then you do this logical pattern flow. And I just kind of tried to quantify that, like as an example, that when blank happens, I blank. So when I get it cleared for takeoff, I turn on the landing light. That's a trigger and a flow. Even if it's just one item turning on the landing light, there may be 3 or 4 items, but develop a flow that's in a pattern that you like. So you can see when these things happen, you do something to acknowledge that. And like I was telling someone earlier that if my FO says, well, we're cleared to land, sometimes we forget. I look up, if my landing light's on, then we were cleared to land.
I love that you know that. And I love you know that with so much confidence, because I feel like maybe even especially private owners, it's like if you look back at that Snodgrass accident or any of those accidents that you showed, there will come a time where you get so familiar with the machine, you just feel like you get in it and it's like putting on a backpack, anybody who's listening who doesn't feel that yet with an airplane, maybe you felt that with a motorcycle, but there comes a time where this thing that felt so challenging to you just feels like second nature. And it's almost more important then to have these ways of behaving that are just triggered and built into you and done the same way every time.
Right. Right. And that's what they teach, like at the airlines. Here's an example of a flow. And I remember when I got checked out on the 727, we had the S scan, the L scan, the Z scan with a tail. So give it a name. So you know that like the trigger is going to be this. And if it has a shape that you can recognize, you're easy to remember it. Like I remember on the 767, clear to start engines, I'd do this arc to the left, or like a backwards R. In the 172 or 152, I would teach or backwards 7, for an engine failure.
Right.
It's not backwards, but you're drawing it backwards. You're starting at the bottom of the fuel selector, work your way up and do a 7 or upside down L, some people call it, but that takes you through everything and you don't have to go hunting.
Yeah.
And
I think too, that like, it's, for anybody that's listening, it's almost more important, I think, to do it consistently, not what it is, right? Like maybe it's the 7 up flow or the upside down L, or maybe it's something different, but the key is that for you, that's the way you do it every time, and it never varies,
Right. You got to do what works for you. And that's why I like customizing these things, because some things might work better than others for you. In my flying club, we had a engine hit a tow bar during engine start. The prop hit the tow bar. Any techniques on maybe keeping that from happening?
Yeah, it's funny. I laugh because this one, I've like my mentor Richard is always living like just inside my brain somewhere. He also whacked me in the head a lot, but for him, I couldn't let go of the tow bar if it came off the nose wheel. So I mean, if I was going to let go of it, even as quick as like just running back to shut the door, like let's say I'm pushing the airplane around. And by the way, it's not just Richard. I teach this today, and this is how I expect my students to do it. But even if you just need to close the door of the airplane, if you're going to let go of the tow bar, it has to be detached from the wheel. And you can then go close the door, come back, pick it up, attach it again. So you will never see me, hopefully, or any of my students, hopefully, with a tow bar sticking off the wheel without a hand attached to it. So
discipline, not even in the hangar. I see people leave it on in the hangar. And even though you're not going to start the engine in the hangar, it's just a habit that your body will be okay with. Right. If you leave it there outside the hangar. And I just
you'll never be that person who calls a Vemco and says, the tow bar was on there and the prop struck it.
Yeah. It happens a surprising amount of time. And just keep these rules. The word is discipline.
Right.
How about aircraft lights? Do you do anything ritually with the lights on the aircraft?
Well, I mean, I think at this point, I'm against the flow a little bit with the strobes because whenever the engine's running, I have all the anti-collision lights on. Unless it's nighttime, then I'll turn the strobes off until I pull onto the runway.
Yeah.
But other than that, no, I don't have. I love the one that you just described, and in the spirit of this is like a living, breathing thing, right? Like if you hear something that someone's doing and you want to add it into your system, the idea that when you're clear to land, turn the landing light on. I really like that one.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything like that.
I can just hear people arguing that, saying, well, I fly in a busy area and I want that landing light on when I'm within 10 miles of the airport. And I get that. I would too. Like if I'm flying in Southern California, I probably wouldn't use that. In the airplane I'm flying, I've got other recog lights on and stuff like that. But you have to decide, is it worth that? No, I think like you keeping your lights on with the engines on, you want to be as conspicuous as you can and not worry about light bulbs. So, 100%. Find another switch to do when you're cleared to land. It doesn't matter. If you want to keep your landing light on earlier, then do that. But have a ritual. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the call outs? I know that you got any of those you have your students do?
Oh yeah, 100%. And a lot of this stuff comes from just studying those single pilot 135 operators where redundancy is so hard to come by. And I think a lot of times that's the disconnect in discussing this stuff, is that the people that are really, really good at it typically have a crew environment where there's a pilot flying and a pilot monitoring. So in GA, it's a little bit tricky sometimes to distill this stuff down, but call outs, I think, are an important part of redundancy in a single pilot world. So you heard me describe what I want my students saying during taxi, but probably the most famous ones would be the takeoff call outs,
right,
which are tied to a lot of different things, some of which you briefed during the takeoff. The power's set, the engine gauges are checked, the airspeed's alive, the abort point is passed, the rotation speed is met, there's no runway, right? There's a set of strict call outs for all of that.
And a lot of those, as I hear you saying them, require some preparation. Like you need to know where the abort point is, where you're not going to get off the ground. There's some rules of thumb we can use. You've talked about that online before. Also, Cirrus, they got a call out, right? Do you teach in Cirrus?
Well, it's been a while, but yeah, I've got like over 1,000 hours teaching in the SR-22.
Yeah, the cap's okay or something like that when you get to certain
cap's
altitude.
Available, I think, is the language.
Cap's available, yeah. So it's saying that out loud. That's what Cirrus instructors recommend doing. That's what Cirrus, the manufacturer, recommends. You talk a lot about turn back to the runway after engine failure. When it would be more hazardous not to, only in that condition, but. I also have a call out for my students, like turn back okay. If you're at one of those airports and you've predetermined this, then,
right? It's so important to say it. And the example I sometimes use when I'm lecturing is going to a party and saying hello to someone and saying the wrong name, but you don't know it's wrong until you hear yourself say it.
Right.
And I think, like if someone came up and called you Barry, for example, might happen, right? But they don't know they're saying it wrong until it comes out of their mouth. And then they hear it and they're like, oh, that's not Barry, that's Brian. That's proof that you have redundancy among your senses. It sounded good in your brain, True. But your ears caught your mouth in the act. And so in a world where redundancy is hard to come by, saying things out loud is really important.
Yeah. When I was flying, a big heavy month of airliners, and then I go jump back into a Cessna and I wind up saying the call sign of the airliner on the radio on accident, or the last N number I was flying, or whatever. But I've used the wrong name back in college before, and that did not end well. That's all I'm going to say about that. But I also have learned to answer to Barry, and I'm honored to do so.
Yeah, maybe that was a bad example.
Right. Well, there's some technology that can help us, with our SOPs. And, a lot of this is new, especially for you and me with our gray hair. So I'll look for some suggestions for how technology can be used from people in the forum, the poll that I've got a link to in the follow-up email and on the website. But we can talk about, timers, lights, and switches. I talked about a couple of them. Timers are all over the place. And, like for switching tanks, I think timers with alarms or something, tying one thing to another is a really good idea.
Yeah, I agree. And I think timers just as a thing are underutilized. I've got when we do those airplane camp trips in the summer, there's a gentleman that comes and teaches with us. Eric Cope is his name. He's a former airline pilot and just a world class pilot. And I love flying with Eric. He owns a 180, and I sat down with him recently to fly home or something like that, and I noticed that his habit patterns kicked in, and before he started the engine, his seatbelt comes on, he tightens it down, and he just casually takes a pencil and notes the time. Like what time is about to start the engine, you know? Yeah. And it's just like one of those things that's kind of a lost art. And he woke that back up in me. But just keeping track of what time do we start the engine? What time are we taking off? You know, just noting the time along the flight is an important thing. Yeah.
So my instrument students when we do IFR training, they have a pad of paper on their knee. You don't need as much to write down as you nowadays as you used to, but the top right corner of every one of my instrument students, and a couple of them still are flying for the airlines today, still do it. But it's the OOI, O-O-O-I. It's out, off, on, in.
Yeah.
Right? Every one of those times. So you start the engine, it's out. You blocked out. You take off, write the time. And that's part of my acronym on the runway. So a lot of people will use the lights, camera, action or whatever. I'm afraid to say the one that I use, but my students know it. It works well. You remember it. Yeah. I won't say the acronym, but it's time, instruments, transponder, switches. And that's the one that I use, but that's where you write the time down again for takeoff time when you take the runway. Because, you know, that's your fuel gauge. It's also you're activating a flight plan time. It's also IFR. It's based, your loss of comm procedures are based on that. So
100%. Yeah. And it's the point at which you set power, you know, or set takeoff power. And I think I just added it to the end. I do lights, camera, action, time off.
Okay. That works. I like mine better. I'm not going to say
I like yours too.
Not everybody would like it though. So EFBs have checklists. I don't know. I think I know where you stand on that. They're coming more and more popular. They'll even talk to you. Yeah. If you use it regularly and you use it well, and it's a good routine that you don't mess up, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's redundant. And I've had people sort of talk me into it, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, where like if a student can make a logical argument to me that, hey, this is the way I like it. This is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it this way every time. And as long as it holds water for me, then I'll go along with it. And then I'll just hold them to that. And so a lot of people have come to me and said, hey, these EFB checklists are redundant. They're not do lists because when I tap it, it changes color or something. So I can look up, look away, get distracted, come back, and I know exactly where I left off because it's where the color didn't change. You know?
Right. Or I dropped my pencil onto the eraser, hit it, and it checked the box. But you never know. I mean,
don't try ideas in my head.
I agree with you. Let the students do what they're comfortable with, but I'm going to hold you to it. I think that's a great way to do it. So like when they're climbing out, cruise climb, I just say, I don't care what airspeed you fly out. I just want to know which one it is so that I know that I'm going to hold you to that. So if you're fast or slow, I'm going to get on you for that.
Exactly.
Another good tool out there is the flight risk assessment tool. More and more operators are using that. The FAA makes one. And it's basically like maybe some kind of electronic document. It could be an Excel spreadsheet, but there are some iPad ones. And you just basically, am I flying in mountainous area? Check the box. Is it night? Yes. Are the winds more than 30 knots? Yes. Have I flown has it been more than 90 days since I've flown? Yes. And so it starts building a score, a score of danger, you know, and basically helps you make a decision. You know, flying in the mountains by itself isn't bad, but you combine it with all these other things and it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And we really need help here, you know, so any help is appreciated and is good help. And I like the frat tools because you can't really outthink them.
Yeah.
You can ignore the score at the end potentially because no one's watching.
Well, that's what people do. They justify it, you know, okay, I can do this. I got this, you know.
Yeah.
But I think also having
that's like where the rubber meets the road is, you know, in a world where, let's say, no one's watching, so to speak, you know, that's where it gets hard.
Right, exactly. And so pilots need to have the discipline. Discipline is the big word that I just keep coming back to. Fly as though, you know, my dad always says, who's the best pilot? The one who's got the FAA sitting right next to him. So you always pretend, or like, I guess, who's the best driver? It's the driver that's got a cop in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
And I think that's good advice.
It is good advice.
Yeah. We could talk about this all day long and we could probably spend a whole day doing it.
Yeah. I hope we do again at Oshkosh. It'd be fun.
We should. I can't believe how the time has flown. Yeah, if you're at Oshkosh, come find us. We'll be doing it, I'm sure.
We'll do it somewhere.
So let's go back to our quiz questions, and a lot of these come from my dad's book. Well, One Test Pilot, 1001 Things You Thought You Knew About Aviation. And boy, I've learned a lot from this. There's some of it is trivial. Some of it is actually, regulatory and factual. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. But that's where these questions come from mostly. Some of them I made up. The bad ones that you don't like are probably the ones that I made up. So what aircraft accident is responsible for the use of checklists? We asked that at the beginning, and it's either a B-17 at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, or United 173 near Portland. Well, I happen to know that United 173 led to CRM. That's why we have CRM today. That was when it ran out of fuel. But the captain wouldn't listen to the flight engineer who kept telling him, we're running out of fuel, we're running out of fuel. Oh. Well, the minute you take off, you're running out of fuel. As soon as you start burning it.
Right.
Different
that
degrees.
Seems like a silly thing to ignore.
Yeah, or Northwest after takeoff from Detroit, which was a flap issue. And the answer is it was the prototype B-17 Flying Fortress. The official investigation of that crash determined that the prototype bomber's flight crew had neglected to release the flight control gust locks. Ironic, here we are talking SOPs tonight. We looked at a couple accidents, and here's another one. They were intended to prevent damage to the control surfaces while on the ground, from the wind. And the Tower recognized the test pilot, his last name was Tower. He recognized the mistake and tried to release the ground control locks, but the flight control locks, but he couldn't because from his position in the cockpit. Also, some airplanes, the air load on them, like that Gulfstream crash in Bedford, went off the end of the runway because they didn't, have the flight control gust lock unlocked. Which means not only did they didn't do that procedure, the pre-flight, they also didn't check their flight controls, and they also ignored some other warnings as well, some red flags. So it's pretty bad. Number 2, lights, camera, action used in the film industry. How does it apply to pilots? It was either a reminder to YouTubers to start the camera, a memory jogger for position reports, or a memory jogger for the before takeoff items. And I think we mentioned it already. We talked about it a little bit and what we do. The lights, camera, action is a memory jogger for the before takeoff items. Many pilots will use it as like lights, turn on landing lights, camera, turn on transponder, action, mixture prop throttle, or talk to the tower. I don't use that one, but I do like I said, time, instrument, transponder switches. You can spell that out, and if you like it, use it. If not, don't. Third question. What does it mean when a military pilot says reading the instructions? Now, I would have guessed the answer to this. I would have thought they're using a checklist. That's probably what most people said. I can't see the results here, but I'm guessing that's what most people said. I don't know. He or she is ejecting from the aircraft, or he or she is coping with an emergency. I mean, any of those two of them sound more pliable than one of them. But what does it really mean? Do you know, Jason?
I don't know. I would have gone with A, just like you.
Yeah, because that's what we're talking about tonight. So that's the teaser, but A is not correct, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, no, the answer is they're ejecting from the aircraft.
That is not what I would have.
I know. The euphemism is for pulling the face curtain, which is used to hold the pilot's head still and protect them from debris and wind blast during ejection from some aircraft. And there are no instructions on the curtain, but if it were, they could read the instructions at that point if they read really, really fast.
Wow.
Yeah, all right. So question 4. What items on board Apollo 11 were so integral to the success of the first manned flight to the moon that command module pilot Michael Collins called them the 4th crew member? I almost actually did give away the answer to that. And we've been talking about them. Was it pencils, the 4th crew member, paper, or checklists? Do you know, Jason?
Well, checklists is where that's the one you gave us earlier. So that sounds right.
I do that. I do it all the time.
Right.
Sometimes my humility will just joke around doing things like that because you'll remember it.
Yeah. Well, that one's
no, I actually screw up. Every now and then I do. All right, question 5. True or false? An air traffic, different topic here, obviously. An ATC clearance is required to enter Class D airspace. Is that true or false? What do you see students or pilots like? I give a flight review and I'll ask this question and I get the wrong answer.
I don't know that I get the wrong answer. I mean, sometimes I get people that are calling late, but
yeah,
I don't know. They, keep in mind too that I'm training in the San Francisco Bay Area most often, and airspace is one thing that's sort of trial by fire. You're thrown in the deep end of the pool pretty early.
Yeah, I learned in LA.
My basic training was really out of Oakland, which is a Class Charlie, and most folks are training at Deltas with Bravo on top of them and Charlies all around them. So
yeah. So it's false. You don't need a clearance. The AIM just says that you need to have two-way radio communication with the tower. So if they say your end number standby, you've got two-way radio you can enter. They'll specifically say remain clear, then you can't enter. Or if they just say aircraft calling standby, then that's not two-way radio communication. So you cannot enter if they just say aircraft calling standby. And that's spelled out in the AIM. It's all there. A little different topic, but maybe we'll do one of these on airspace one day. I've only touched the tip of the iceberg on the SOPs. If you want to share yours, please feel free. This link is also on my website, captainshift.com, or you can scan that and just fill out, hey, if you got any SOPs that you can give us that you like, why should it just rely on the instructors? You guys may have some way better stuff than we do. So let's, make this a collective effort here to come up with the best. If I like yours, when I publish the personal flight operations manual and you have a unique one, I'll give you credit for it. So my final thoughts for tonight are basically standard operating procedures. They play a crucial role in aviation safety. It promotes consistency, like we've been talking about, it reducing or trapping errors and also enhancing communication. So adhering to these SOPs will significantly mitigate risks. It'll improve your overall flight safety. The SOPs help pilots manage workload more effectively because you're doing it the same way every time. You know what you're going to do. You're almost uncomfortable when you don't do it. Mm-hmm. But it makes safer, faster decisions. You're going to make safer, faster decisions when you do that as well, especially when you're under pressure because you're going to fall on those habits. So let's make aviation safer. Remember, there are only two speeds. Slow or screw up, right? Use the first one. Next month, we're going to be talking on June 12th. Again, it's the second Thursday of the month. We'll talk about professionalism. I'm going to talk with college instructor and NAFI board member Aaron Dabney, and he'll help discuss the softer side of aviation safety, including aeronautical decision making as well. So join us on June 12th at 7 p.m. or watch any time after that on the shiftshow.TV. Again, a special thank you to our friends at Avemco who made this possible. To Jason Miller. Jason, thank you so much of the Finer Points for joining me and offering his wisdom, even though it's only a tip of the iceberg of what we could talk about.
Thank you, Barry. My pleasure.
Glad to have you. We'll hope we can do it again sometime.
Hope so.
To Barry Schiff for his stories and for training me and for me, providing me, and to John Typin at APT for producing this program, and finally a special thank you to the Wings Industry Network and the FAA safety team for helping to make this possible. Don't forget to go and take your quiz for Wings credit on this on the main web page. Once again, thanks for joining us. We'll do it again next month on the second Thursday of the month, June 12th. Remember, 2 speeds.